everyone, to the very first episode of the Voices of Rondo podcast, hosted by the Rondo Youth Council. My name is Javier Soto. I'm here with my lovely co-hosts.
Exactly.
I guess you could say.
I am Rafi. I am a senior at Central High School, which is right down the block from here, where we are recording this at the High School for Recording Arts on University Avenue. And yeah, Erica.
I'm Erica. I go to Brooklyn Center High School, and I'm a junior there.
Awesome. So yeah, this is the first episode of our Rondo podcast, and we're so happy that everyone can join us.
We just wanted to welcome you all and thank you all for tuning in, and make sure to check out our YouTube channel too.
Yeah. So we have been learning a lot about the history of the Rondo neighborhood where we are, and the history of transportation systems, which have been, so destructive to this neighborhood and have this inherent racism within them, especially in highways. And we are going to talk a bit about that history and also about the future of Rondo and the possibility and the effort to build a land bridge over the I-94 highway, which cut this community in two and represents the beginning of potentially a new future to restore Rondo to the vibrancy of its past.
Yep, that's what we're going to be talking about. And stay tuned for the end, because we have a shocking discovery that we'd like to share with you all, featuring a white-owned business down in Clarksdale, Mississippi that made Airbnbs from former slave quarters. So stay tuned for that.
And on another note, right now I'm going to be showcasing a trailer for a documentary that, students here at the High School for Recording Arts had made. It's called Rondo Beyond the Pavement. If we could play that clip, that'd be great.
When I saw the pictures of the devastation, my soul wept.
People lost their homes. Over 400 homes got lost.
My father lost his home.
All of my friends that lived across the street from me, all of their houses were gone.
I didn't really know what they were doing. I didn't really understand it all.
They had a scare tactic with a crane over one of the neighbors' homes.
The ball would come in, smash the house.
My parents were in the kitchen crying, and they told us that we had to move.
There were other routes.
They could have chose a better route.
There was a cohesiveness with the community prior to I-94. There were businesses, families looked out for one another.
We had a lot of kids and families that were tight-knit, and they all watched each other.
That was the strength of the community.
If we know who we are and who we came from, it helps us to go forward in our lives. If we know nothing about our history, then how are we to know about our future?
That was Rondo Beyond the Pavement, like I mentioned. It's available on Amazon Prime for free. And that trailer we just watched is available on YouTube as well.
Yeah, so Rondo is a predominantly African-American community in St. Paul. And in the 1950s, Interstate Highway I-94 was built right through it, splitting the community in half. And just the destruction and displacement and just overall economic hell that it caused for the community, it's detrimental. It was detrimental, and the waves that caused still flow to this day.
I don't know, it's just, you don't really see it in scale when you just say it as a number. But the prosperity study that we read, I think, does a pretty good job at kind of portraying that.
Yeah.
And this is something that it happened in Rondo, and you could see the impact that it had on the community and the individuals and their lives and their homes. And it happened across the country too, right? It was this was an effort of, building highways and of this so-called urban renewal across the U.S. to encourage suburbanization and help, ostensibly help cities, but actually destroy these communities like Rondo. And so this is a pattern that kind of recurs so often that we see has such a visceral impact in Rondo.
Yeah, Rondo was really just kind of like a cultural melting pot of art, of language, and just everyone who lived here came together, and it wasn't just one or two people who came from here. We have so many influential figures and media that is stemmed from this one little community in St. Paul.
To that end, we've got Rondo was like a super important neighborhood, I think, in terms of like what you were saying, like the arts and politics,
music, culture, politics.
Music and culture for African Americans, like even across the U.S. You had August Wilson, the playwright, who lived in Rondo and wrote like pretty much all of his like major plays here, living in Rondo. You had Roy Wilkins, who became like the national leader of the NAACP, who grew up in Rondo. And I mean, you had Tony Stone also, who was like the first, I think, female player in the professional baseball. And there is so much like history of this community and the culture and like the Black excellence in Rondo that was destroyed. Kind of like what you were saying. It was this center for so much, and then it was wiped out.
Exactly. Yeah. And even now, it's not like it only was limited to being all of that in the past, but even now, where we're sitting used to be the Rondo Ballroom, where famous people like Richie Valens would perform.
And that's not to say I feel like that there's not this community and this center here right now. There certainly is, but imagine what it could have been without the highway.
Exactly, yeah. And then talking more too about generational wealth, from the prosperity study, like Black homeownership just went down ever since the highway was built. And of course, that's going to have a huge effect on the generational wealth that's going to be passed down to that community's future. So
yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
I believe home ownership, just in general, has gone down since the destruction of the highway, and then gentrification as well, because we're, on one side you have people who see like they come into Rondo and they see what they would, I guess, call like the hood.
Yep.
And then just like about a mile down, you got these huge luxury apartments.
Condos,
exactly, advertised.
Whole Foods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like people tend to kind of mix up like affordable housing and slums. They kind of group them together, which is not the case at all.
And like you see a lot of gentrification happening in Rondo. Like there are so many families that can't afford housing in Rondo, and they've been living in this neighborhood for generations, and they have to leave and go find somewhere else because they just can't afford to stay here, to live here.
The highway's impact is like truly just generational and has like long-lasting effects, like with housing and with wealth. I think there were studies done to show like that the average wealth in Rondo is just so much lower than in the rest of the city, because
so like Woodbury or something,
compared, or the suburbs especially, and that was not the case before the highway was built. And so that's like a direct effect here, and it's having impacts decades down the line.
And not only has it had effects on like wealth and like home ownership, but health, like physical health, being so close to the highway, being smack up against it, that's got to cause some health problems along the line. Definitely. Like you asthma, that stuff causes cancer,
the carbon
and it's proven to
emissions
do.
in the air, most definitely.
So not only is it like have these families been driven out of this neighborhood, but even the ones who stayed have the possibility of passing down lung cancer, passing down asthma, stuff like that. And why else? Because they're living so close to the highway.
Yeah. And we all have like this experience with the highway personally, right? I mean, Javi, where do you live in relation to that? You live pretty close.
I recently moved, but I used to live on Charles and Grotto, which was just like down the street, basically. And I wasn't, admittedly, I wasn't one of the houses that were overlooking the highway. but it was a short walk away. All I had to do was just go straight, and then I'd be at the highway in like 5-10 minutes.
Right. And Erica, you're in Brooklyn Center.
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn
north
Center.
of Minneapolis.
Yeah,
but it's still
right on the
affecting
border of
you.
North Minneapolis, and I live right by I-94. And yeah, I can't really stay outside for too long before I can just feel my throat clogging because I got asthma. So it's living in such close proximity has a huge effect on how much time I can spend outside. So yeah.
So speaking of that prosperity study I mentioned, some students here who are, involved with High School for Recording Arts, but also ReConnect Rondo, such as we are, had made a video previously about that topic. And so I think we should take a second to watch that.
Since 1956, Rondo has lost more than half of its population. There were once almost 3,000 homeowners in Rondo. Today, only half as many remain. 700 homes were lost to the construction of the I-94 highway. Along with the homes that were taken, the destruction of Rondo, 300 black businesses were also lost. As a result of the destruction of Rondo, the wealth gap between blacks and whites living in Minnesota increased. It is estimated that $157 million in revenue for the black community have been stripped between 1956 and 2018. Today, the average Rondo resident cannot afford to buy a home in the Rondo area. The wealth that has been lost by the African Americans in the Rondo community between businesses and homes was critical to the progression of the black community in Minnesota. This money could have gone to pay for college degrees and starting more black-owned businesses, increasing the overall being in the black community to the present day.
The destruction of Rondo by I-94 resulted in a loss of equity and homes that could have been curated at a total of $157,150,000 in generational wealth for blacks by the year 2020. That means since 1958, these houses generated full equity twice. This inheritance could have paid for 4,800 four-year college degrees. At the time, one house was worth 7 college degrees. According to the 1980 census, the 700 Rondo homes could have provided degrees for more than half of all 18-year-olds in Ramsey County, or for every black child between the age of 10 and 24. Currently, the income opportunity gap in Rondo North compared to the surrounding Twin Cities area is nearly $99 million per year. If Rondo South was included, that gap would reach almost $147 million per year. While this is a great loss for the Rondo area, it is also an opportunity to restore hope in the community and provide equity that was once lost through the building of a land bridge. It also gives way to another opportunity for improved quality of life for the overall black community of Rondo through black business ownership, as well as parks, recreational centers, and cultural events.
So that was the prosperity video that we just watched. That's available to watch on the ReConnect Rondo YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mean, just watching that video, it's like, it's just crazy, like how many homes were destroyed, businesses were destroyed, but I mean, through all of that, just the amount of destruction that was caused by the highway, so countless homes and businesses just weren't able to survive it. Some of them were that I can think about, like for example, the Penumbra Theater. It's one of the only black-owned theaters in this entire country, owned by Lou Bellamy.
There's also like the Best Steakhouse, Tiger Jack's, which admittedly is no longer a candy shop, but the building still stands. Mm-hmm. It's still owned by the same family, so I'm gonna count it in there. Mm-hmm. I would make the argument that the High School for Recording Arts is also kind of a direct result of everything that's happened. This school was made to serve the marginalized individuals that were kind of brought up in this community, and not even just in this community, around Minnesota and around St. Paul, and so.
Yeah. One of the other things that struck me about the video that I thought was really important was it kind of framed this economic loss and just general generational loss around education. So It was like talking about how many college degrees this money could have given, or the kind of education that children of Rondo could have had if not for this, right?
Exactly. And like you don't have to go to college to be smart, but I mean, education, knowledge is power, and when you take away somebody's education and somebody's knowledge, you're taking away everything. You truly are.
Yeah. And I think so much about kind of what we're trying to do here in as the youth council is like get educated ourselves, right, about this history, and then like educate the community, or at least help people understand around the country, maybe even about what has happened here in Rondo. And so it's like this education, like you said, is, I think someone in the first video that we watched in the trailer mentioned this. They said, how are you gonna, something to the effect of, how are you gonna know like what to do in the future if you don't know about the past?
Yeah, exactly. Like helping people understand the story of the ground beneath their feet.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's important to note that we took away these people's right to education, but not only did we do that, we took away their ability to even reach that in the first place, because there were people who, you know, like, the chance was there for them, but then not only did we take that away from them, it's like we put it on the shelf even higher. You know, we went out of our way to keep that away from them, out of their grasp, out of their hands.
And speaking of education and educating those around us, let's just take it back to the beginning. So we're going to watch a video created by High School for Recording Arts students and by the ReConnect Rondo organization around how the transportation system has not always been helpful to Black and Brown Americans.
Hello, my name is Ace, and I'm an intern here at ReConnect Rondo. In this video, we'll be providing you with historical examples of how transportation has affected BIPOC communities throughout the years. After a brief history lesson, we'll also be taking a look at how transportation investment, urban renewal, redlining, and restrictive covenants impact BIPOC communities today. Let's get started, shall we? Over the last 200 years, transportation has not only opened doors of opportunity, but it has also brought devastation and terror to millions of residents within BIPOC communities. One pattern presented throughout today's video is that although transportation usually seems to promise equality, historically, it's always favored white Americans. After the ratification of the 13th Amendment, the South implemented a collection of state and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. These statutes were then referred to as the notorious Jim Crow laws. Plessy v. Ferguson details a case where Homer Adolph Plessy challenged an 1890 law that required white and African Americans to sit in separate railroad cars. On June 7, 1892, Plessy bought a ticket from New Orleans to Covington, Louisiana. When deciding where to sit, he chose a vacant seat in a whites-only car. Once the conductor was made aware of the situation, Plessy was then asked to leave, and when he repeatedly refused, he was arrested and thrown in jail. When Plessy was convicted of violating the 1890 law, he filed a petition to the Supreme Court claiming the law violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It took 4 years for the verdict of Plessy v. Ferguson to be announced, and on May 18th, 1896, the court claimed that the protections of the 14th Amendment only applied to political and civil rights, such as voting and jury service, and didn't apply to social rights, like sitting in the railroad car of your choosing. They claimed that the segregated cars for African Americans weren't any better or worse than the cars for white folks. This created the notion of separate but equal, justifying segregation in the South for years to come. This is only one example of the mistreatment BIPOC communities have faced due to transportation. It also highlights how Jim Crow laws kept African Americans from truly reaching equality in the South, creating a large motive behind the next historical event, the Great Migration. From 1910 leading up into the 70s, around 6 million African Americans moved up to the northern, midwestern, and western states of America to pursue educational and economic opportunities, escape racial injustice and violence, and attain their deserved freedoms from the hands of the Jim Crow in the South. The 60-year time frame consisted of two phases: the first Great Migration, from 1910 to 1940, and the second Great Migration, from 1940 to 1970. As great of an opportunity as this was, it's also caused tension throughout the North and Midwest. One significant event that arose from this first migration was the Red Summer of 1919. When American servicemen returned from the war, they were in disbelief to find that their communities had seen such a large demographic change. They were even more shocked and outraged to find that African Americans took their previous jobs. This caused tensions to rise throughout these northern cities, and large mobs and riots were led to intimidate and push out African American families from their well-deserved homes. It's horrific knowing that people chased opportunity and were only rewarded with the same problems they faced living in the South. Similar to the first Great Migration, the Second World War offered even more opportunities for African Americans, and there was a large migration to the west to cities such as Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. One thing these two migrations have in common is that the cities that offered the most opportunity were cities whose economic infrastructure relied heavily on transportation. Now that you know how transportation has affected BIPOC communities in the past, how does it affect these same communities today? After the Great Depression, the U.S. government made it the priority to evaluate riskiness of mortgages. To determine risk, in the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation graded cities into 4 categories. Neighborhoods made up of minorities were deemed as the worst category with the description of hazardous. These areas were outlined in red, hence the name redlining. When the Federal Housing Administration was founded in 1934, it furthered the efforts of segregation by refusing to insure mortgages near BIPOC communities due to redlining. On top of that, people of non-Caucasian descent were restricted to certain areas within the city where they could and couldn't live. These restrictions were known as restrictive covenants and served as another attempt to keeping BIPOC communities from thriving. A direct result of these actions were urban renewal, which started off as an idea promising cities funding to invest in affordable housing and help clean up impoverished parts of the city. In reality, this only ended up displacing many people of color from their homes, and any money promised to compensate these families either showed up late or, in most cases, never showed up at all. In many large cities, there is always a direct correlation between areas that were once redlined to previous and current urban renewal projects. Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago is a perfect example of this. Urban renewal isn't the only thing that displaced people of color from their homes. Transportation investment has also had a significant impact on BIPOC communities. In summary, transportation investment consists of investing in roads, railroads, inland waterways, maritime ports, and airports. When done successfully, transportation investments can create employment and connect neighborhoods. However, historically speaking, this was rarely the case. Those who made decisions on transportation seldom considered BIPOC communities and the neighborhoods being affected. One example of this would be the building of I-94 and the destruction of the Rondo neighborhood here in St. Paul. This interstate split the entire community in half and displaced thousands of people from their homes. A choice made by government officials that families are still recovering from to this day. In this video, we've briefly talked about how transportation has affected BIPOC communities throughout the years, while also giving you an example of how it's fallen short for so many of these promises. Hopefully, with this knowledge, you'll be able to gain a better understanding of why we're fighting so hard to make this project a reality. This has been Ace with ReConnect Rondo, signing off.
Wow. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share out from the video?
Yeah, I mean, it's a story I've heard before, but every single time I hear it, it's like, it's just a little kind of refresher of what's wrong with the world, man. The Plessy v. Ferguson case. Since I started this internship, I didn't know about it prior to it, but learning about it and continuing to learn about it, just the deeper you go, the more you kind of realize how messed up everything was, man.
Yeah, and there was a lot of thinking when we got to the part of the video when it was talking about the redlining, because I hear a lot of people talking all the time oh, why do black people choose to live in these horrible homes and in these horrible areas? It all goes back to redlining. We were pushed on to these little plots of land in the city. We weren't allowed to get better housing. We weren't allowed to get better higher paying jobs, and then that's obviously going to affect the future economically. And of course, people make it out. Some of us make it out, me being one of them. But the same can't be said for all of us, and it's not a choice. It's not a choice. That's what I was thinking about when listening to that section of the video.
I hear a lot of time people being like, "We made it out the hood. We made it out the mud." And to an extent, I'm all for that. Well, not to an extent. I am all for that completely. I love the notion of breaking free from those chains that people have kind of put you in. in the first place. When I think about that, it just makes me sad because we shouldn't have to break free from anything. We shouldn't have to make it out alive.
I love that you mentioned that, because I'm from North Minneapolis, right? And my dad wanted to move me and my sister out of there he wanted us to live in a better environment, a safer environment. But, it's always got me thinking, like, I wish we never had to leave. I wish I never had to leave, because I left all that Black culture, like growing up where I'm growing up, I feel really disconnected from Black culture. I truly do. And that's it's sad, because like I'm half Black. I get my Blackness from my dad, and he was adopted. And so we don't know his biological family. So there's like, I never got to grow up with that Black family. So there's just a huge disconnect, and if I were to grow up in that community, I'm sure I wouldn't feel this way. And I wish that I didn't have to leave that,
Yeah, and I feel like the video, I think it also touched on like the potential benefits of like some kinds of transportation, right? Because transportation can connect communities, if done right. And I think one of the important things about doing transportation right is having it done like with input from the community or even by the community itself. Like I think, if you lose touch or if you purposefully ignore what the people who are being affected want, I mean, you get situations like what happened in Rondo and across the country. And I think what the land bridge is trying to do is to recenter the community's own like communal will and desire to connect the Rondo and to take control of these policies themselves and have an influence on the community without the government kind of stepping in and doing this. And so I feel like that's something that could be something to learn from this history of transportation that we saw.
And honestly, this might be a hot take. I personally don't like highways at all. I think that we can honestly move away from that idea. I've heard about this thing called walkable cities, where
crazy.
You don't need huge highway systems to get around. Like, I wish that we could start as a people envisioning a future past this prehistoric kind of thing that has been racist.
Yeah, and they called it urban renewal. They said they're renewing the cities by putting all these highways through.
And like maybe like why can't we get like some like a few bullet trains here and there, or people start walking and biking more.
Bikes,
I don't know. Like it's a lot to envision. There's a lot of concerns that are going to be brought up, but I think that it's something that we should start a conversation about and start thinking about new ways to approach transportation.
Yeah. You can't walk across the highway.
Sorry.
No, you can't walk across the highway. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you could.
You could try.
Don't do it though.
I'm a firm believer in the fact that we as a collective, as a species, have evolved past the need for automobiles and highways.
Truly.
Because we just we never even needed them in the first place.
No. I mean, like we used to be one with nature, like, and like, especially with our transportation system, I feel like it's also caused that huge drift between humans and nature. Like, it's just like, it's a huge
I think
drift.
automobiles in general, and the fact that we're catering more towards these things that take up like such a huge portion of our lives. We spend all of our money on gas, and then we drive, half an hour to work.
Takes you to school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to. I mean, living here in St. Paul, everything you have to get.
Like you can't do anything if you don't have a way to get some. Like if you don't have those automobiles to take you where you need to go, you can't do nothing. Nothing with your life. You can't
because
do
nothing is catered towards us. It's catered towards the distance you got to travel. Right. It's catered towards that money you got to spend to get there.
Automobile companies who want.
Imagine because like. And it's all about industry, like the fossil fuel industry. Like, imagine if we just didn't need that anymore. Like, they would fall. They would fall. Like, the fossil fuel industry, like, it'd be no more. Like, they would lose all billions of dollars. They can't afford that. They need our money.
Yeah, and there are ways to, like, think toward the future with, like, more advanced tech or, like, thinking, for what is the potential, while kind of what you guys said, actually like taking care of our environment and making our cities more livable and more comfortable for the people who actually have to live in them.
Eco-friendly,
right? So it's
equitable,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
I kind of want to point out the fossil fuel industry, the people who are at the head of that, and the people who are at the head of, eco-friendly cars, right? Those are the same guys, the same exact guys. I'll tell you, because I think the problem we're trying to solve, or at least steer away from, is not being so automobile centric. But you have, obviously the car manufacturers, they're. What am I trying to say? They're
in both cases, you're still staying dependent on the automobile.
You are staying
industry.
dependent on that car, exactly.
It kind of reminds me of like black capitalism, for example. I think that's the right term for it. But like whenever people think the solution to all of our problems is to vote more black and brown people into office, like that's not really gonna like.
People are people, man.
Because the only thing that's changed now is the people that are screwing you over look like you. Like
exactly.
that's what is changing, honestly. Like and that hurts even more. Like.
It does. It does to have the people you feel are on your side
not be
just
exactly
completely disregard you.
Exactly.
And it happens all the time. It happens in every single way. You think of women in politics. You think of Latinos in politics. You think of
LGBTQ people in politics.
Black people in politics. Politics. It's all the same idea.
It truly is. Yeah.
We want people to look like us and be in power. Yes, we want to have that relation to them, and that in turn makes us feel empowered. But what really empowers us is having power, is being the one in control of what you do, of what you decide, what you pay for, what you spend your hard-earned living on.
Yep, and exactly. No matter how many people that look like you vote into office, like this is still the white man system. This is still the colonialist system. Like that's the same. That's all the same.
Because we're living in the colonial's dream. That's what America is right now. And it wasn't what it always was. And it's not what it has to be. A lot of people feel like the American dream is what needs to be America. And
to some extent, that history is always present in America.
It's always going to be present. The amount of things that colonialism has done, it's irreversible. Truly. You can't undrive the natives from their land.
You can't ungenocide a people.
You can't unbuild that highway through this neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, Rondo was what? It was founded by this French, fur trader.
Yeah, Joseph Rondo.
Right? Who came in here and wanted to, set up a business, essentially. And without regard for the people who were living here. You can see this history, of colonialism dates back to the founding of Rondo and the beginning of this system of, exploitation of, people who live here and people who have been living here and have been disadvantaged by so much. And, that ties back to what the highways have done, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I feel like this is kind of a good place to kind of bring it back to the Great Migration. That's something we talked about. It's, one of the main reasons that Black and brown people had to move from the South was the lack of, work. They didn't have a lot of... They couldn't make a living down there.
Yeah, sharecropping didn't earn you nothing.
And that all kind of started with the creation of the automated cotton gin, which started in Clarksdale, Mississippi. It started on this Hopson Plantation that we actually visited.
Yep.
And like we had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast, we kind of uncovered some stuff, and it doesn't just kind of stink, man. It smells. It reeks to high heaven. There's it's a white-owned business that has they're using slave quarters that are 150 feet away from the cotton fields that were probably still up about 100 years ago. The spaces available at the Shack Up Inn are only available on shackupinn.com. and are in no way affiliated with Airbnb or its parent companies, nor do we condone the renting of these spaces.
And what did they do with those slave quarters? They made them into Airbnbs.
Refurbished.
Airbnbs,
Completely
yep.
refurbished.
Wi-Fi, air conditioning, everything under the sun. They got it in there for you.
You two were down in Clarksdale, right? I was not, but I'm guessing that it was mostly tourists who were staying there. Right?
Yes,
there was one person we met that I think said, you know, there's some units that you can rent to own, but the majority of them are like hotel space or Airbnb.
And then they got the cotton fields out there for the aesthetic.
The aesthetic. Famous people go there, man. I don't know. It's insane to me. But I think I'm just going to leave it to you guys to watch the footage.
Yep. So
it's right here for you.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, Keith didn't believe me. I told him about it.
About what? About these?
These were hotel rentals down
yeah.
Stayed in.
Yeah, dude, that's insane.
Isn't it?
This is bizarre as hell. And they got like a little like, oh, what?
They're profiting from.
Yeah. They're the quarters where people used to stay who worked the fields. And this was a site that was an old cotton gin where they spun the cotton automatically, and put people out of work. This was one of the very first sites that put people out of work in the cotton fields and created the Great Migration.
Wow. It's so crazy.
Yeah, look at this.
All right, so thank you all for watching.
And on the next episode, we are going to be diving deeper into your guys' experience in Clarksdale. I think we've got some interviews. And we're going to be looking at the beginning, or one of the roots of transportation in America, the Mississippi River, and how that ties in with slavery and racial segregation and oppression. And so, yeah, thank you all very much. You can check us out on ReConnectRondo.com or on social media at ReConnectRondo.